The screaming started at exactly 3:47 in the afternoon. 7-year-old Destiny Brown pressed her small brown face against the cool glass of her bedroom window, watching as Mrs. Pearl Jenkins stumbled backward from the grocery store entrance. Her weathered hands shook as she clutched a crumpled paper bag to her chest. Mr. Thompson stood in the doorway, his face twisted with anger, shouting words that made Destiny's stomach feel sick. "Get out of here, you crazy old woman. Nobody wants you around here." Mrs. Jenkins looked so small standing there on the sidewalk. Her gray hair was messy, and her old blue dress had a tear near the pocket. Other people walking by crossed to the other side of the street. Some pointed and whispered. A few kids threw small rocks and laughed when she flinched. Destiny had seen this happen before. Every day, actually. Mrs. Jenkins lived in the tiny house at the end of Maple Street, the one with the broken fence and overgrown yard. Everyone in their neighborhood in Detroit called her crazy. They said she talked to herself and did strange things. The grown-ups told their children to stay away from her. But something about the way Mrs. Jenkins looked today made Destiny's heart hurt. The old woman wasn't acting crazy at all. She was crying. Real tears rolled down her dark, wrinkled cheeks as she slowly walked away from the store. "Destiny, baby, come away from that window," called her mama, Grace, from downstairs. Grace worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and helping at the community center during the day. She was always tired, but she always had time for Destiny. "Mama, why is everyone so mean to Mrs. Jenkins?" Destiny asked as she came down the stairs. Their small house smelled like the cornbread Grandma Lucille was making in the kitchen. Grace paused from folding laundry on the couch. Her hands stopped moving and she got that look on her face she got when she was thinking hard about something. Some people are scared of what they don't understand, baby. And sometimes people believe stories that aren't true. What kind of stories? Grandma Lucille came into the living room, wiping her hands on her apron. At 72 she was the wisest person Destiny knew. Her hair was white as cotton, and her eyes were kind but sharp. She sat down next to Destiny on the couch. "Child, Mrs. Jenkins has been living in this neighborhood for 40 years. But about 10 years ago, something happened that changed how people see her." "What happened, Grandma?" Grace and Grandma Lucille looked at each other in that way grown-ups do when they're deciding if a child is old enough to hear something important. "There was a fire," Grandma Lucille said slowly, "at the old community center on 5th Street. Mrs. Jenkins was there that night, and afterward people started saying she caused it. They said she was acting strange, doing weird things." "Did she cause it?" "Nobody knows for sure what really happened," Grace said. "But people started treating her different after that. They stopped talking to her. Stopped being friendly. Some folks even started spreading rumors that she was dangerous." Destiny thought about this while she watched her mama fold tiny socks and shirts. Mrs. Jenkins didn't look dangerous. She looked lonely and sad. "Can I ask you something, baby?" Grandma Lucille said, putting her arm around Destiny's shoulders. "What do you think Jesus would do if he saw someone being treated mean like that?" This was easy. Destiny had been going to Sunday school at New Hope Baptist Church since she could walk. He would be kind to them. He would help them. That's right. And what does the Bible say about how we should treat our neighbors? Love them like we love ourselves. Grandma Lucille smiled and kissed the top of Destiny's head. "You're a smart girl. Now, why don't you help me finish that cornbread?" Later that evening, after dinner and homework, Destiny lay in her bed thinking about Mrs. Jenkins. Through her window, she could see the old woman's house at the end of the street. One small light was on in the front room. Destiny wondered what Mrs. Jenkins was doing in there all by herself. Was she lonely? Was she hungry? Was she scared? The next morning, Destiny walked to school like always, but this time she paid attention to Mrs. Jenkins' house. The yard was full of weeds and the mailbox was crooked. But she noticed something else. There were flowers planted by the front steps. Not fancy flowers, but colorful ones that looked like someone cared for them. At school, during lunch, Destiny asked her best friend Simone about Mrs. Jenkins. "My mama says she's crazy," Simone said, unwrapping her sandwich. "She talks to people who aren't there and does weird stuff in her yard at night." "Have you ever seen her do weird stuff?" Simone thought about it. "Well, no. But my mama says dash." "What if your mama is wrong?" Destiny interrupted. "Mamas don't be wrong about stuff like that," Simone said, but she sounded less sure than before. That afternoon, Destiny decided to walk past Mrs. Jenkins' house on her way home from school instead of taking her usual route. As she got closer, she could hear something that made her stop walking. It was singing. A soft, pretty voice singing an old hymn that Grandma Lucille sometimes hummed while cooking. Destiny crept closer to the fence and peeked through a gap in the boards. Mrs. Jenkins was in her backyard, tending to a small vegetable garden. She was singing Amazing Grace, while she watered tomato plants and pulled weeds. She moved slowly but carefully, like she loved what she was doing. This didn't look crazy to Destiny. This looked like someone who cared about growing things. Just then Mrs. Jenkins looked up and saw Destiny peeking through the fence. For a moment they just stared at each other. Mrs. Jenkins had kind eyes, Destiny noticed. They were tired and sad but kind. "Hello there, little one," Mrs. Jenkins said softly. Destiny's heart pounded. She knew she was supposed to run away. Everyone said Mrs. Jenkins was dangerous. But those kind eyes didn't look dangerous at all. "Hi," Destiny whispered. "You have a beautiful day now," Mrs. Jenkins said and went back to her gardening. Destiny ran the rest of the way home, her mind spinning with questions. Why was everyone so scared of a lady who sang hymns and grew vegetables? That night at dinner, Destiny made a decision that would change everything. "Mama, I want to do something nice for Mrs. Jenkins." Grace put down her fork and looked at her daughter carefully. "What kind of something nice?" "I don't know yet. But she looks so sad all the time. And she's our neighbor. Grandma Lucille says we should love our neighbors." Grace glanced at Grandma Lucille, who was smiling into her mashed potatoes. "What did you have in mind, baby? Maybe we could take her some of Grandma's cornbread? Or some soup when she's sick?" The room got quiet except for the sound of forks on plates. Finally, Grandma Lucille spoke up. "You know what, child? I think that's exactly what we should do. In fact, I think it's what we should have been doing all along." Grace looked worried. "Mama, you know how people talk. If they see us being friendly with Mrs. Jenkins dash. Let them talk," Grandma Lucille said firmly. "Since when do we let other people's gossip stop us from doing what's right? That woman has been hurting for 10 years, and not one person in this neighborhood has shown her kindness. It's about time someone did." Destiny felt a warm feeling spread through her chest. This was what it felt like when you knew you were about to do something important. "Can we start tomorrow?" she asked. "We can start tomorrow," Grandma Lucille said. "But first we need to pray about it. God's going to need to help us with this one." As they held hands around the dinner table, Destiny felt excited and scared at the same time. She didn't know it yet, but tomorrow would be the beginning of the biggest change their neighborhood had ever seen. The cornbread was still warm when Destiny and Grandma Lucille walked up to Mrs. Jenkins' front door the next afternoon. Destiny's hands shook a little as she held the plate covered with Grandma's best dish towel, the one with little yellow flowers on it. "Remember what we talked about?" Grandma Lucille whispered. "We're here to show love, not to ask questions or judge. Just love." Destiny nodded and knocked on the door. They could hear shuffling footsteps inside, then the sound of several locks being undone. The door opened just a crack and one eye peeked out. "Mrs. Jenkins?" Destiny said in her clearest voice. "I'm Destiny Brown. I live down the street with my mama and grandma. We brought you some cornbread." The eye blinked several times. Then the door opened a little wider and Mrs. Jenkins' whole face appeared. Up close, Destiny could see that she had been crying recently. Her eyes were red and puffy. You brought me something?" Mrs. Jenkins' voice was soft and scratchy, like she didn't use it very much. "Yes, ma'am," Destiny said, holding up the plate. "My grandma makes the best cornbread in Detroit. We thought you might like some." Mrs. Jenkins stared at them for a long moment. Then she started crying again, but these tears looked different than the sad ones from yesterday. These looked like happy tears. "Nobody has, in so long," she whispered, then cleared her throat. "Would you like to come in? I could make some tea." Destiny looked up at Grandma Lucille, who nodded with a warm smile. Mrs. Jenkins' living room was small but very clean. The furniture was old but well kept. The walls were covered with photographs, pictures of children and families and church groups. In one corner sat an old piano with music books stacked neatly on top. "Please sit down," Mrs. Jenkins said, hurrying to move some books off the couch. "I'll put the kettle on." While Mrs. Jenkins was in the kitchen, Destiny looked at all the photographs. In many of them, she recognized a younger Mrs. Jenkins surrounded by smiling children. "Were you a teacher?" Destiny called out. "For 35 years, Mrs. Jenkins called back from the kitchen. 3rd grade mostly. Some 4th and 5th grade too." When Mrs. Jenkins came back with the tea, her hands were steadier and her voice was stronger. "I taught at Roosevelt Elementary until I retired," she said, settling into her chair. "I loved those children. Every single one of them." "Why did you stop?" Destiny asked, then caught Grandma Lucille's look. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be nosy." "It's all right, dear," Mrs. Jenkins said sadly. After the fire, after what people said about me, the school board thought it would be better if I took early retirement. They said parents were worried. What really happened that night? Grandma Lucille asked gently. Mrs. Jenkins was quiet for a long time, sipping her tea with shaking hands. Finally she spoke. I was working late at the community center. We were getting ready for the children's Christmas play. I was there alone, organizing costumes and props. When I left around 9 o'clock, everything was fine. But 2 hours later, the building was on fire. She paused and looked out the window. The next day, people started saying they saw me acting strange that evening. They said I was talking to myself and carrying things out of the building before the fire started. They said maybe I said it on purpose. Did you? Destiny asked quietly. No, baby. I would never hurt anything that brought joy to children. That community center was where we held Sunday school classes, youth programs, after-school help sessions. It was my second home. Grandma Lucille reached over and patted Mrs. Jenkins' hand. We believe you. Mrs. Jenkins looked up with surprise. You do? Course we do. Anyone can look at this house, look at your garden, look at how you take care of things and see that you're not someone who destroys. You're someone who builds up. They spent the next hour talking about Mrs. Jenkins' garden, her years of teaching, and her memories of the neighborhood when it was friendlier. Destiny learned that Mrs. Jenkins had helped dozens of struggling students learn to read, had organized neighborhood cleanup days, and had volunteered at the food bank every Saturday for 20 years. Why don't people remember all the good things you did? Destiny asked. Fear makes people forget, Mrs. Jenkins said sadly. When something bad happens and people are scared, they want someone to blame. It's easier to blame someone who's different, someone who doesn't have many friends to defend them. As they were getting ready to leave, Destiny noticed something that made her heart hurt. Mrs. Jenkins' refrigerator was nearly empty, and her cabinets looked bare too. Mrs. Jenkins, when was the last time you went grocery shopping? Oh, Mr. Thompson doesn't like me coming in his store anymore. And the bus to the other stores? It's hard for me to carry bags on the bus with my arthritis. Grandma Lucille and Destiny looked at each other. What if we helped you with that? Grandma Lucille offered. We could go shopping together or pick things up for you when we go. Mrs. Jenkins started crying again. You would do that for me? But people will see you with me. They'll start treating you badly too. Let them, Destiny said firmly, sounding just like her grandma. If they want to be mean to us for being kind to you, then they're the ones with the problem. That evening at dinner, Destiny couldn't stop talking about Mrs. Jenkins. Mama, she was a teacher for 35 years. And she has pictures of all her students, and she grew up right here in Detroit, and she plays piano, and she's been volunteering at the food bank forever. Grace listened while she ate her chicken and rice. Sounds like you learned a lot about her. She's not crazy, Mama. She's just lonely and sad because people are mean to her. And she doesn't have enough food because Mr. Thompson won't let her shop at his store. Grace put down her fork. He won't let her shop there? She has to take the bus to other stores, but it's hard for her because of her arthritis. That's not right, Grace said firmly. Nobody should be kept from buying food. Can we help her, Mama? Can we take her shopping with us sometimes? Grace looked at Grandma Lucille, who was nodding encouragingly. I suppose we could, Grace said slowly. But Destiny, you need to understand something. If we start being friends with Mrs. Jenkins, some people in this neighborhood might not like it. They might start saying mean things about us too. Destiny thought about this for a moment. Would you rather have people like you for being mean, or have people be mad at you for being kind? Grace smiled and reached over to squeeze her daughter's hand. When did you get so wise? I learned it from you and Grandma Lucille. The next morning, Destiny woke up with a plan. She was going to ask Mrs. Jenkins to teach her piano. She was going to invite her to church. She was going to make sure Mrs. Jenkins had everything she needed. But first she was going to talk to Simone and the other kids at school. Maybe if they knew the truth about Mrs. Jenkins, they would stop being afraid of her. As Destiny walked to school that morning, she felt like she was carrying something important inside her chest. It was the feeling of knowing you're about to make a difference in someone's life. She just didn't know yet how much Mrs. Jenkins was about to change her life in return. 2 weeks had passed since Destiny first knocked on Mrs. Jenkins' door, and already their friendship had become the most important part of both their days. Every afternoon after school, Destiny would stop by for piano lessons. Mrs. Jenkins was an amazing teacher, patient and encouraging. Her old piano was perfectly tuned, and she knew hundreds of songs by heart. Your fingers are getting stronger, Mrs. Jenkins said as Destiny practiced scales. Soon you'll be ready for Amazing Grace. It was always my favorite to teach the children. Destiny smiled and kept playing. She loved these quiet afternoons in Mrs. Jenkins' living room, with sunlight streaming through the clean windows and the smell of whatever Mrs. Jenkins was growing in her garden drifting in from outside. Mrs. Jenkins, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Why do you have so many pictures of children, but no pictures of your own family? Mrs. Jenkins' hands stopped moving on the piano keys. She was quiet for so long that Destiny wondered if she shouldn't have asked. I never had children of my own, Mrs. Jenkins said finally. My husband died in Vietnam when we were very young before we could have a family. After that, all my students became my children. Every one of them was special to me. Do any of them still visit you? Mrs. Jenkins shook her head sadly. After the fire, after the rumors started, their parents didn't want them around me anymore. Children I had taught and loved for years were told to stay away from me. Destiny felt angry bubbling up in her chest. It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. Well, I'm not staying away, she said firmly. And neither is my family. That weekend, Grace took Mrs. Jenkins grocery shopping for the first time in months. They went to the big supermarket across town where nobody knew them. Mrs. Jenkins was so happy to pick out her own fruit and vegetables that she nearly cried in the produce section. I forgot how good fresh apples smell, she said, holding one up to her nose. At church on Sunday, Grandma Lucille did something that surprised everyone. During testimony time, when members could share what God had been doing in their lives, she stood up. I want to tell y'all about something that's been weighing on my heart, she began. We got a sister in our neighborhood who's been hurting for a long time. Mrs. Pearl Jenkins. Some of y'all might know her name, might have heard stories about her. The church got very quiet. Destiny could see people looking at each other with raised eyebrows. Well, my granddaughter and I have gotten to know Sister Jenkins, and I want to tell you something. She's one of the most godly, kindest women I've ever met. She spent 35 years teaching children, 20 years volunteering at the food bank, and I don't know how many years playing piano for church services before she moved to our neighborhood. Destiny held her breath. This was the moment everything would change. But for 10 years now, she's been living like an outcast because of rumors and fear. And I'm ashamed to say we all let it happen. We let gossip and fear keep us from loving our neighbor like Jesus told us to. Pastor Williams, a man Destiny had known all her life, leaned forward in his pulpit chair. What are you saying, Sister Lucille? I'm saying it's time we acted like Christians instead of just talking like Christians. It's time we reached out to Sister Jenkins and showed her the love of Jesus. After church, people came up to Grandma Lucille with questions. Some seemed interested in helping. Others looked worried or disapproving. But Destiny noticed that several people asked for Mrs. Jenkins' address. That afternoon, something wonderful happened. Mrs. Beatrice Washington from the church showed up at Mrs. Jenkins' door with a sweet potato pie and an apology. I'm sorry I believe stories without getting to know you myself, she said. Lucille Brown set me straight and I wanted to make things right. Mrs. Jenkins invited her in and they spent 2 hours talking and laughing. When Mrs. Washington left, she hugged Mrs. Jenkins goodbye and promised to come back. But not everyone in the neighborhood was happy about the changes. On Monday afternoon, as Destiny was walking to Mrs. Jenkins' house for her piano lesson, Mr. Thompson stopped her on the sidewalk. Little girl, I need to talk to you, he said sternly. People are saying your family is spending time with that crazy old woman. That's not safe for a child. She's not crazy, Destiny said politely but firmly. She's nice. She used to be a teacher. Listen to me, Mr. Thompson said, bending down so his face was close to hers. That woman caused the fire that destroyed our community center. She's dangerous. Your mama should know better than to let you around her. How do you know she caused the fire? Destiny asked. Were you there? Mr. Thompson straightened up, looking frustrated. Everyone knows what happened. But how do you know? Did you see her do it? Well, no, but dash. Then you don't really know, Destiny said. You're just repeating what other people said. As Destiny walked away, she heard Mr. Thompson muttering angrily behind her. She knew he was going to cause trouble. That evening, Grace got a phone call from Mrs. Carter, one of the neighborhood gossips. Grace, I'm concerned about your little girl spending so much time with Pearl Jenkins. You know what people say about that woman? What exactly do people say? Grace asked calmly. Well, you know. About the fire. About her being unstable. Have you ever talked to Mrs. Jenkins yourself? Well, no, but dash. Then how do you know what kind of person she is? Mrs. Carter got flustered and hung up. But Grace knew this was just the beginning. More people would call. More people would try to pressure them to stay away from Mrs. Jenkins. That night, the family held a meeting around the kitchen table. People are starting to talk, Grace said. Some folks aren't happy that we're friends with Mrs. Jenkins. They might try to make things difficult for us. What kind of difficult? Destiny asked. They might not want to be friends with us anymore. They might say mean things about us. Some people might even try to get me in trouble at work. Destiny felt scared but also determined. What do you think we should do? Grace looked at Grandma Lucille, then back at Destiny. I think we should pray about it. And then we should do what we know is right no matter what other people think. Are we going to stop being friends with Mrs. Jenkins? No, baby. We're not. The next afternoon, Destiny arrived at Mrs. Jenkins' house to find her working in her back garden. But something was different. Mrs. Jenkins was digging in a corner of the yard that she had never worked in before. What are you doing back there, Mrs. Jenkins? Mrs. Jenkins looked up, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Oh, Destiny. I was just... Are you okay? Mrs. Jenkins put down her shovel and sat heavily on an old tree stump. I've been thinking about what your grandmother said at church. About it being time for the truth. And I realized, I've been hiding something for 10 years. Something important. Destiny's heart started beating faster. What kind of something? The night of the fire. I wasn't just organizing costumes and props. I was hiding something in the community center. Something I was trying to protect. What were you protecting? Mrs. Jenkins looked toward the house, then back at Destiny. Come inside, child. It's time you knew the whole story. As they walked toward the house, Destiny felt like she was about to learn something that would change everything. She just didn't know how much. Mrs. Jenkins' hands shook as she unlocked a wooden box that had been sitting on her dining room table. Destiny had noticed it before but never asked about it. Now she could see it was old and carved with beautiful designs. Sit down, dear, Mrs. Jenkins said softly. What I'm about to tell you, it's something I've never told another living soul. Destiny settled into her usual chair, her heart pounding. Through the window she could see storm clouds gathering in the afternoon sky. The night of the fire, I wasn't alone at the community center, Mrs. Jenkins began, opening the wooden box carefully. There was someone with me. Someone who needed help. Inside the box were photographs, letters, and a small teddy bear that looked very old and well-loved. Her name was Angela Morrison. She was 8 years old and she was my student 5 years before the fire happened. But that night she came to me because she was scared and had nowhere else to go. Mrs. Jenkins pulled out a photograph of a little girl with braids and a missing front tooth, smiling at the camera. Angela's mama had a boyfriend who hurt Angela. Hit her. Did worse things. Angela had been trying to tell people for months, but nobody believed her. They said she was making up stories for attention. Destiny felt sick to her stomach. What happened to her? That Tuesday evening the boyfriend hurt Angela real bad. She ran away from home and came to find me. She knew I stayed late at the community center on Tuesdays, working on the children's programs. Mrs. Jenkins pulled out a letter written in a child's handwriting. The paper was yellowed with age. She was bleeding and crying and so scared. I cleaned her up and gave her some food from the center's kitchen. Then I called the police and social services. But while we were waiting for them to come, Angela got more and more frightened. She was sure no one would believe her, sure they would send her back to get hurt again. Did they believe her? I don't know. Because before anyone arrived, Angela saw car headlights in the parking lot. She was sure it was her mama's boyfriend coming to find her. She panicked and ran. Mrs. Jenkins picked up the teddy bear and held it close to her chest. I chased after her, calling her name. But she ran into the woods behind the community center. It was dark and I couldn't find her. I spent hours looking, calling for her. When I finally gave up and went back to get my car so I could search the streets, that's when I saw the smoke. The fire had started? The electrical system in that old building was always having problems. The fire department later said it was probably an old wire that overheated. But by the time the fire trucks came, most of the building was gone. Destiny was quiet, trying to understand. What happened to Angela? Mrs. Jenkins' voice broke. They found her body 2 days later, in the river about a mile from the community center. The police said she must have fallen in while she was running in the dark. She couldn't swim. Tears rolled down Mrs. Jenkins' face as she spoke. If I had been faster. If I had caught up to her. If I had made her feel safer so she wouldn't have run. Mrs. Jenkins, Destiny whispered, it wasn't your fault. That's what I tried to tell myself. But then people started saying they saw me acting strange that night. taking things out of the building before the fire. Talking to myself. Were you? I was carrying boxes of Angela's clothes and a teddy bear to my car. I was going to keep them safe until the police came. And yes, I was calling Angela's name, trying to get her to come back. But from a distance, in the dark. I suppose it did look strange. Destiny understood now. People thought you started the fire. They thought I was crazy. Maybe dangerous. And I couldn't defend myself without telling them about Angela. Without telling them that a little girl died because I couldn't save her. Why couldn't you tell them? Mrs. Jenkins looked out the window at the gathering storm. Because Angela made me promise. Before she ran, she made me promise not to tell anyone she had been there. She was so scared that people would blame her for the fire, or that her mama's boyfriend would find out she had tried to get help. But she's gone now. You could tell people the truth. For 10 years I've been trying to decide if I should. But every time I thought about it, I remembered that scared little girl begging me not to tell. How could I break a promise to a child who died? They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the first drops of rain hit the windows. Mrs. Jenkins, Destiny said finally, maybe Angela wouldn't want you to keep suffering for her. Maybe she would want people to know the truth so they would stop being mean to you. Do you think so? I think she would want you to be happy. And I think she would want people to know that you tried to help her. Mrs. Jenkins wiped her eyes with a tissue. There's something else, dear. Something I've been working on for 10 years. She pulled out a thick folder from the bottom of the wooden box. I've been researching Angela's case. Reading everything I could find about her family, about what happened to her mama's boyfriend. And I found out something important. What? He's in prison now. Has been for 7 years. Turns out Angela wasn't the only child he hurt. Other families came forward and he got sent away. But it was too late for Angela. Mrs. Jenkins opened the folder and showed Destiny newspaper clippings and court documents. If I had been able to save Angela that night, if she had lived to tell her story, maybe she could have helped put him away sooner. Maybe she could have saved other children from getting hurt. Destiny felt a strange mix of sadness and anger and hope. So what are we going to do? Yes, we. You're not alone anymore, Mrs. Jenkins. You have me and Mama and Grandma Lucille. And maybe some other people too if they know the truth. Mrs. Jenkins started crying again, but these were the good kind of tears. I've been thinking about talking to Pastor Williams. Maybe asking him to help me tell the community what really happened. But I'm scared, Destiny. What if people don't believe me? What if they think I'm making it up to make myself look better? Then they're wrong and eventually they'll figure that out. But what if they do believe you? What if telling the truth helps you stop feeling so sad and guilty? Just then there was a knock at the front door. Mrs. Jenkins and Destiny looked at each other with surprise. Very few people ever came to visit. Mrs. Jenkins opened the door to find a young woman standing on the porch, soaking wet from the rain. Mrs. Jenkins? My name is Sarah Chin. I'm a social worker and I was hoping I could talk to you about something important. Mrs. Jenkins invited her in and offered her a towel. I'm sorry to bother you, Sarah said, but I've been working on some old cases trying to help families get closure. I came across the name Angela Morrison, and several people told me you might have known her. Mrs. Jenkins went very still. Destiny reached over and took her hand. What do you want to know about Angela? Mrs. Jenkins asked carefully. I'm trying to piece together what happened to her the night she died. Her case was never fully investigated because everyone assumed she just accidentally fell in the river. But recently, some new information has come to light about her home situation. Information that suggests she might have been running away from something. Mrs. Jenkins looked at Destiny, then back at Sarah. What kind of new information? Her mother's ex-boyfriend was recently convicted of child abuse involving other victims. During his trial, he mentioned Angela's name. He said she had been causing problems before she died. Mrs. Jenkins' grip on Destiny's hand got tighter. Mrs. Jenkins, I think Angela might have been trying to get help the night she died. And I think you might know something that could help us understand what really happened to her. The room was so quiet that Destiny could hear her own heartbeat. This was it. This was the moment Mrs. Jenkins had to decide whether to keep her promise to a scared little girl, or tell the truth that might help other children. Yes, Mrs. Jenkins said quietly. Yes, I know what happened to Angela. And it's time I told someone. 6 months later, Destiny sat in the front row of the newly rebuilt Detroit Community Center, watching Mrs. Jenkins play piano for a room full of children. The building was beautiful, bigger and brighter than the old one, with modern safety systems and cheerful yellow walls covered with children's artwork. But the most beautiful thing was seeing Mrs. Jenkins smile again. Really smile, the kind of smile that reaches all the way to your eyes. After Mrs. Jenkins told Sarah Chin the truth about Angela's last night, everything changed. Sarah had helped Mrs. Jenkins contact the police and give an official statement. The case was reopened, and for the first time in 10 years, people learned what really happened. The newspaper ran a big story with the headline, "Local Teacher Breaks Silence to Honor Student's Memory." The article told Angela's story and explained how Mrs. Jenkins had been protecting the child's secret all these years, even when it meant being treated as an outcast. The community's reaction was swift and overwhelming. People who had crossed the street to avoid Mrs. Jenkins now crossed the street to apologize to her. Mr. Thompson from the grocery store came to her house with tears in his eyes, begging for forgiveness and offering to deliver groceries to her for free for the rest of her life. "I was so wrong," he said, standing on her front porch with his hat in his hands. "I let fear and gossip turn me into someone cruel. Can you ever forgive me?" Mrs. Jenkins had hugged him and said, "Of course I can. We all make mistakes when we're scared." The city decided to rebuild the community center and asked Mrs. Jenkins to help design the children's programs. They also created the Angela Morrison Memorial Fund to help children who were being hurt at home. Mrs. Jenkins became the fund's first director. "It's what Angela would have wanted," she told Destiny. "She would want her story to help other children be safe." Pastor Williams had asked Mrs. Jenkins to become the church pianist, a position she accepted with joy. Every Sunday, her music filled New Hope Baptist Church with songs of praise and healing. But the biggest change was in the neighborhood itself. Mrs. Jenkins' house became a gathering place. Children came for piano lessons and homework help. Adults came for advice and friendship. Her vegetable garden grew bigger every year because so many people wanted to help tend it. Grandma Lucille often said it was like watching a miracle happen in slow motion. "Sometimes it takes just one person willing to show love to change everything," she would tell Destiny. "You started something beautiful, baby girl." On this particular afternoon, as Mrs. Jenkins finished her piano lesson with the community center children, Destiny noticed someone special in the audience. Sarah Chin, the social worker who had helped uncover the truth, was sitting in the back row with a little girl who looked to be about 6 years old. After the other children left, Sarah approached with the little girl. "Mrs. Jenkins, I'd like you to meet someone special. This is Jasmine. She's been living with a foster family while we work to keep her safe from a dangerous situation at home. She's been asking to meet the lady who helps protect children." Jasmine was shy at first, hiding behind Sarah's legs. But when Mrs. Jenkins knelt down to her level and smiled, the little girl stepped forward. "Are you the piano lady?" Jasmine asked in a whisper. "I am," Mrs. Jenkins said gently. "Would you like to try playing something?" Jasmine nodded eagerly. Mrs. Jenkins lifted her onto the piano bench and showed her how to find middle C. As Jasmine pressed the keys and heard the clear, sweet notes, her whole face lit up with wonder. "It sounds like magic," Jasmine said. "It is magic," Mrs. Jenkins agreed. "The magic of making something beautiful." Destiny watched from her chair, feeling her heart swell with happiness. This was what Mrs. Jenkins had always been meant to do: help children, teach them, protect them, love them. For 10 years, the community had missed out on all the good things Mrs. Jenkins had to offer because they were too afraid to look past their assumptions. "Destiny," Mrs. Jenkins called, "would you like to show Jasmine how to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star?" Destiny joined them at the piano, and soon all three of them were playing together, their 6 hands creating a joyful sound that filled the room. As they played, more people began to arrive for the evening community meeting. Destiny saw her mama and Grandma Lucille come in, followed by Mrs. Washington, Pastor Williams, and dozens of other neighbors. Even Mr. Thompson was there, carrying a box of fresh fruit to share. The meeting was about planning the community center's first annual Angela Morrison Day, a day dedicated to child safety awareness and celebrating the importance of listening to children and believing them when they ask for help. "We want every child in this city to know that there are adults who will believe them and protect them," Pastor Williams announced. "And we want every adult to know that it's our responsibility to watch out for all children, not just our own." Mrs. Jenkins stood up to address the crowd. Destiny noticed that her voice was strong and clear now, not shaky like it used to be. "When I was a little girl," Mrs. Jenkins began, "my grandmother used to tell me that sometimes God puts us in difficult places not to punish us, but to prepare us for something important. For 10 years, I didn't understand why I had to go through such loneliness and pain. But now I see that God was preparing me to help other children like Angela." She paused and looked around the room at all the faces that had once turned away from her in fear and suspicion, but now looked at her with respect and love. Angela Morrison was a brave little girl who tried to save herself and couldn't. But her story is saving other children now. The fund created in her memory has already helped 12 families get the support they needed to keep their children safe. The awareness programs we're starting will teach hundreds of children that they have a voice and that adults will listen. The room was completely quiet except for the sound of people wiping away tears. I want to thank this community for teaching me about forgiveness and second chances. And I especially want to thank the Brown family, Grace, Lucille, and especially little Destiny, for showing me that love is stronger than fear. Everyone turned to look at Destiny, who felt her cheeks get warm. She hadn't done anything special. She had just been kind to someone who needed kindness. But as she looked around the room at all the people who were now working together to make their community better, she realized that sometimes small acts of kindness really could change the world. After the meeting, as people were cleaning up and saying goodbye, Jasmine tugged on Destiny's sleeve. "Can I ask you something?" the little girl whispered. "Sure. How did you know Mrs. Jenkins was nice when everyone else thought she was scary?" Destiny thought about it for a moment. "I looked at her eyes," she said finally. "Mean people have mean eyes. But Mrs. Jenkins has kind eyes. And I figured if Jesus was here, he would be nice to her, so I should be nice to her too." Jasmine nodded solemnly as if this made perfect sense. As Destiny walked home with her family that evening, she felt grateful for so many things. She was grateful that Mrs. Jenkins was happy now. She was grateful that other children like Angela would be safer because people were paying attention. She was grateful for her mama and grandma Lucille, who had taught her to love people even when it was hard. But mostly she was grateful that she had learned one of the most important lessons of her life. That every person has a story and every person deserves to be treated with kindness until you know what their story is. "Destiny," Grandma Lucille said as they reached their front porch, "do you know what I'm proudest of?" "What?" "I'm proud that when you saw someone hurting you didn't walk past. You stopped and helped. That's what love looks like in action." That night, as Destiny lay in bed, she could hear the sound of piano music drifting through her window. Mrs. Jenkins was playing hymns like she did every evening now. But tonight the music sounded different. It sounded like celebration. It sounded like joy. It sounded like hope. And in her heart, Destiny knew that somewhere, somehow, Angela Morrison was smiling too.